Art has the power to change you. It can make you feel things, stir up emotions you didn't think a painting or sculpture could evoke. Happiness, sadness, even fear. But what happens when you change the art? When you smear rage across the canvas, color in your animosity. When your very soul creates something that takes on a life of its own. Originally released in February 2012 by the developer Kuri, Ib immerses a young girl of the same name into the stuff of nightmares within a cursed art gallery. It's literally one of the most iconic RPG horror games of its time due to the unsettling atmosphere and world-building, relatable characters, and its varied endings that leave players either content or in despair, depending on which you receive. I'm playing the 2022 remake for the purpose of this video, but we'll show footage from the original when appropriate. The story is pretty much the same, but the remake features new puzzles, updated artwork, and an updated conversation system between the characters. I've also timestamped the video so you can skip around to whatever interests you the most. This is your spoiler and trigger warning, so if you're ready, sit back, relax, get cozy, and let the nightmare begin. In the early afternoon, under a gray sky, 9-year-old Eve and her parents arrive at an art gallery. In her pocket is the handkerchief she received from her mother for her recent birthday. It's Eve's first time in a gallery, and the current exhibit features the works of the famous artist, Weiss Guertena. While her parents are at the front desk, Eve decides to wander the gallery on her own. During Eve's exploration, she finds the 3rd floor of the museum, which is meant to be a rest area for patrons. Waiting for her is a large, colorful painting titled Fabricated World. Suddenly, the lights flicker, and the music in-game stops. Eve returns downstairs to find her parents, but everyone in the gallery has vanished, and the artwork, it's moving. A fruit falls from a painting, a cat meows from within its canvas, and when Eve returns to the fabricated world, she finds blue paint leaking from the frame. The paint spells out the sentence, "I'll show you a secret spot." Then the words, "Come Eve," are written in red on the floor. A set of blue footprints appear next, leading Eve back to the 1st floor of the museum and to a painting titled The Abyss of the Deep. It's a large canvas on the floor featuring a monstrous fish underwater. Eve walks forward and falls down into its depths, finding herself transported into a darker, scarier gallery. She finds a rose in a nearby vase, the museum label stating, "When the rose withers, so too will you wither away." Roses become the life source of humans trapped in this cursed gallery, and in the Guertena exhibit, we learn from a sculpture titled Embodiment of Spirit that roses only bloom in wholesome bodies. She then obtains a blue key and completes a variety of puzzles within different colored rooms in the game until she finds herself in the red room. After obtaining the red key behind a portrait of a lady in red, Eve finds herself locked within a room filled with books. On a nearby shelf is a moving storybook titled Carrie Careless and the Galette des Rois, written and drawn by X. The entire thing is drawn in crayon, and when Eve reads it, we see an unsettling tale unfold. A friend has made Carrie a special cake with a coin inside for her birthday. If she eats the slice with the coin inside, she'll have good luck. Everyone picks a slice and Carrie takes a bite. But whoops, wouldn't you know it, she swallowed something hard and metallic. Good old careless Carrie. And we're thinking it's the coin, but as her friend returns the plate and knife to the kitchen, her mother is concerned. The key to her father's study is missing and he'll be furious. Where the key usually sits lies the coin. Now what is Carrie's friend supposed to do? After finding the key and unlocking her father's study, the red door opens for Eve, allowing her to leave the storybook behind. Waiting for her, lying unconscious on the ground, is a young man. He's older than Eve and in a lot of pain. He's also gripping a key in his hand. Ebe grabs it and enters the only accessible room at this time. A painting, the lady in blue, is tearing the petals off of a blue rose. Once she sees Ebe, she begins to chase her, and Ebe must grab the rose and escape before being killed. Throughout the game, she can replenish her health by placing her rose in vases filled with water. She does this to the blue rose, returning it to health, then returns it to the unconscious man. He wakes, his pain fading away, and at first he mistakes Ebe for one of the cursed paintings of the ladies due to her brown hair and red eyes. Once he realizes she's human, we learn his name is Gary, and he was also attending the gallery before being pulled in. We can see him at the Guertena exhibit at the beginning of the game, looking at a painting of the hanged man. He also doesn't know how or why they've entered the cursed gallery, but he knows they need a way out, and being kind and considerate, he joins Ebe to keep her safe. He's older and stronger than Ebe, so he comes in handy by reading words she doesn't understand, pushing statues out of the way, and helping to solve puzzles. The game's ending also highly depends on Gary's level of sanity. Striking up conversations with him and preventing him from destroying artwork throughout the game helps the player achieve good endings and build a bond between the two, while breaking things and scaring Gary often results in the worst. In the next room, Ebe and Gary find a painting of a familiar couple. It's Ebe's parents. She wonders where they are, and Gary can tell their absence and being trapped in this gallery is really bothering her. On the painting's frame is a gray key. The two grab it and attempt to exit the room, but the door is locked, and something is trying to come inside. They back away from the door only for a lady in blue to burst through the wall behind them. Another painting enters, chasing them in a frenzy. Ebe and Gary run, zipping around boxes and debris, climbing through the hole the portraits made, only to find themselves surrounded by mannequin heads. They navigate through the maze-like room, and for the canon ending, Gary's going to avoid breaking those statues. They make it through, but Ebe collapses from the stress of it all. This results in a strange dream. In it, her mother and father are searching for her as if she's back in the Guertena exhibit, but the eerie atmosphere and artwork, especially the ladies in red, blue, green, and yellow, they let us know she's still stuck in the cursed gallery. After being attacked by a painting of a lady in white, Ebe wakes to find Gary beside her, his coat covering her like a blanket. She feels awful, and Gary offers her a piece of candy in hopes of making her feel better, which she places in her pocket for later. The room they're in seems safe enough, but they must venture on if they hope to ever escape. Ebe returns Gary's jacket, they navigate through another room, and find themselves staring at a painting titled Separation. Well, that is, until the lights go out. Let's not scare the life out of Gary and let him know that Ebe is near. He'll use his lighter in the room only to find a message written on the floor, noting a ban on fire-starting implements in the gallery. A streak of red, hopefully paint, leads them to another room, colliding straight into a young girl with blonde hair. This is Mary. Gary assumes she was another patron from the gallery and introduces himself and Ebe. He asks her if her situation was similar to theirs, being pulled into the painting and now searching for a way out. But Mary only replies that she was looking to see if there was anyone else within the cursed gallery. She wanted to get out, so she doesn't get to finish her sentence. Gary asked her to join them, and she agrees. She tries to make nice with Ebe, but Ebe isn't having it. Now a trio, Gary asks if Mary has a rose like them. She shows them a yellow rose, and Gary instructs her and Ebe to keep them both safe from harm. Not long after Mary joins the group, she and Ebe become separated from Gary, a wall of thorny vines growing out of paintings and blocking their path. The two girls then set off to find something to cut away the vines, but a mannequin head blocks the way back to Gary. So with no choice but to venture further, Ebe and Mary find strange writing on the walls. I want you to have fun, Ebe. Come to a fun world without any grown-ups. We'll be together. You, me, and our friends. Now who would be writing that, I wonder? They find themselves stuck once more as a giant chasm blocks their path, but the room also contains a blue rose tile. Interacting with it changes the game to Gary's perspective, and going back and forth between him and Ebe allows them to assist one another in completing various puzzles to eventually reunite. Gary is worried about the girls and decides to investigate the previous room they came from for a possible way out. It once held rabbit figurines, but now a bunch of eerie dolls have taken their place. Noticing a bookshelf, Gary pushes it aside to reveal an opening in the wall. This leads him to a series of cords that he can pull, which will lower a painting for Ebe and Mary to cross the chasm like a bridge. Ebe in turn drops a crescent moon piece down the chasm, and Gary uses it to remove some new vines blocking his path. One of the creepy dolls from before follows him, which unnerves Gary, but we probably shouldn't kick it. Just leave it be if you want the canonical ending. Meanwhile, Mary asks Ebe if Gary is her father, is her mother nice, and if only two of them could get out of the cursed gallery, who would she leave with? You know, just normal, everyday conversation, nothing out of the ordinary here. Ebe would rather leave with Gary, which Mary clearly doesn't like. But what can she do? Especially since Gary has come to realize something about her. Something big. And thanks to the strained ear and tattletale painting informing her, Mary knows her secret has been revealed, and this causes her to act very strange. She runs out of the room, and Ebe follows her, finding her stabbing a mannequin head that has once again blocked her way, over and over again. Ebe is too scared to question her, so she walks away, but Mary follows. Ebe has got to get out of there, but the final door is still locked. Gary enters another room filled with dolls to collect the final piece of the puzzle, but of course the door freaking locks behind him, and now Gary has to find the key before a giant red-eyed doll climbs through the painting on the wall. He tears the dolls apart one by one as the monster looms forward, and just when we think he's done for, he finds the key and runs through the door. Doing this allows Ebe to grab the final key in her room, where she can at last open the door. Mary enters with Ebe, asking her, "Why won't you help me? We can go downstairs if we move that statue, right? Why are you running?" She corners Ebe, just as Gary races up the stairs and shoves her to the ground. Ebe hugs Gary, relieved to be rescued and that he is all right. And this is when Gary reveals Mary's secret. Mary is one of Guertena's paintings, the last painting he made before his death. She's not a human at all, and who knows what she might have done to Ebe if Gary hadn't arrived when he did. And that yellow rose of hers? It was a fake, just a part of her painting. She lies on the ground not moving, and Gary and Ebe circle back to a downstairs corridor. It leads them to an area called the sketchbook. Everything is completely drawn in crayon here. The houses, the roadways, the trees. Mary created this part of the gallery for herself, and knowing this, the Carrie Careless story might also have been drawn by her as well. Ebe and Gary enter a nearby house and are reaching for a bucket when the door opens. In steps Mary, wielding a palette knife. She's looking for them both, but they remain silent, hidden behind a nearby wall. Eventually she leaves, and the two carefully make their way to a locked room that houses a large toy box where the final key of the game is said to be located. Without warning, Mary sneaks up behind them and pushes them both inside. They fall down, becoming separated, and when Ebe wakes, she's missing her rose. Luckily, she finds it and the toy box key before finding Gary lying on the floor. He wakes, glad that Ebe is okay, but as soon as they're reunited, the drawings on the toy box floor are completely covered in red scribbles, and the dolls and statues start to attack. Ebe races up a set of stairs, escaping the dangers below and finding a room sealed off with yellow roses. She asks Gary to set them on fire with his lighter, and it works, the pathway now open. It's dark in the room, the air thick and heavy. Gary spots a painting nearby and asks Ebe to get a better look at it. But Mary can't have that, now can she? Once again, she sneaks up behind them, and she can't believe that they're both okay. She wants them to leave. Now. Her rage causes cracks to form in the room, and brandishing the knife, she runs toward them. Ebe and Gary run as fast as they can toward the other side of the room. It's a dead end, but the painting, it can be burned, just like the roses. Gary lights it on fire, and the glass shatters, covering them both. Mary cries out as her body turns to ash and disintegrates, her painting destroyed, and with it, her life. Ebe and Gary are safe for now, but it seems Gary's cut his hand on the glass, so Ebe loans him her handkerchief, the one her mother gave her for her birthday. Together, they use the toy box key to enter an alternate version of the Guertena exhibit. Going up to the third floor, they find the painting of the fabricated world, only it's changed, depicting the real gallery on the other side. The painting's frame fades away, and Gary jumps in, encouraging Ebe to hurry up and join him. But Ebe turns her back to him. She hears someone coming. Could it be Mary? Another artwork come to harm her, maybe. Instead, her mother appears. She's been looking everywhere for Eve, and her father is waiting for her too. She holds her hand out to Eve, beckoning her back down the stairs. Gary can't see Eve's mother, or what appears to be her mother, so she calls for Eve to hurry up. And other mother over here continues to try manipulating Eve, telling her she'll never see her mother or father again if she goes with that stranger. But Gary has protected Eve all this time, and it's him that she decides to trust in the end, jumping toward him just as the painting closes, sealing them both from the cursed gallery once and for all. Back in the real gallery, Eve is all alone and she can't recall what she was just doing. She returns to the main floor of the gallery and finds a familiar-looking man standing near the embodiment of spirit sculpture. When Gary looks at this sculpture, he feels sorrow, though he can't remember why. He apologizes for speaking so bluntly to her, but then he calls her Eve. But who's Eve? Is it really this girl's name? He thinks this should be their first meeting, but yet he somehow knew. Ugh, all of this is getting strange. So Gary goes to walk away before finding the handkerchief in his pocket. Eve's name is embroidered on it, and once he sees the blood from his cut, their time together from the gallery returns to them both. There's so much he wants to talk to Eve about, but he has to get going. So he promises to return her handkerchief soon, and with that, promising they'll reunite in the future. The ending image of the game shows the two waving goodbye for now, the handkerchief in Gary's hand and the yellow candy he gave Eve in hers. This is the best and supposedly canonical ending to the game, which just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. But what kind of horror game would it be if there weren't optional, devastating endings for our beloved characters? There's an excellent video by Cranky Templar that shows all the endings in depth, but for our purposes, I'll just summarize them here. There's the Memories Crannies ending, which is a bittersweet version of the true ending, in which Gary and Eve make it out of the cursed gallery alive, but don't recall one another because Eve never gave Gary her handkerchief. There's also variations of the Eve All Alone ending, where she will either be lured away by the other mother or a fake Gary, choose to sleep and never wake up in a secret dungeon area, or step away from the fabricated world painting as it closes, becoming trapped in the cursed gallery forever. Unfortunately, there's a pretty cruel ending in which Gary dies. When Eve falls into the toy box and loses her rose, Mary finds it. Gary agrees to trade his rose for hers, and Mary can be found later, tearing the petals off of the blue rose in a game of love me not, similar to the situation Gary found himself in at the beginning of the game. This time, however, Mary picks all the petals off, and there's no reviving the rose. Eve returns to Gary, believing him to be sleeping, and after returning to the gallery in the real world, a portrait of Gary has replaced the hangman in the Guertena exhibit. He appears to be sleeping, but we the players know his true fate, and the painting is titled Forgotten Portrait. If Gary dies and Eve fails to destroy Mary's painting, we'll see the Together Forever ending in which Mary has traded places with Gary in the real world. She's become Eve's sister, and if Eve still has Gary's candy in her pocket, Mary will take it and eat it before it has a chance to jog Eve's memories about him and her time in the cursed gallery. As Mary asks Eve if they can play and be together forever, we see an image of the two of them walking hand in hand, and Mary's shadow is scribbly, as if she didn't fully become human after leaving the gallery. Now, these last couple of endings I found particularly interesting. And welcome to the world of Guertena, Gary doesn't make it out of the doll room in time. Instead, he succumbs to the madness inflicted on him by the red-eyed doll, and Eve is unable to snap him out of it. If Mary and Eve have become friends prior to this, Mary will abandon her dream of leaving the cursed gallery to stay with Eve and Gary. Mary will say normally grown-ups aren't allowed, but she'll let it slide for Gary to stay with them this time. The scene will fade to black, then re-emerge to reveal Mary's welcoming party. Some of the painted ladies, statues, and creepy dolls are there, and in the middle, slumped over and lying on the ground, are Gary and Eve's bodies. One of the painted ladies is tearing Gary's rose to bits. Mary grabs the lighter from his pocket before giving it to the red-eyed doll to dispose of, claiming that now they're together, they can play forever. Lastly, if Mary and Eve didn't become friends on their journey and Eve can't bring Gary back to his senses in the bunny room, Mary will leave them both behind to escape the cursed gallery on her own. This is the only time in the game where you can play as Mary, and once she leaves Gary and Eve behind, she heads to the sketchbook area in the fake gallery. However, messages start to appear for her, much like the ones we saw on the wall for Eve previously. These say, "Where are you going? Don't go that way. Come back." All written in blue. She arrives at the fabricated world painting and jumps through, entering the true gallery. Only, something's off. She's so excited to be free, but once she goes downstairs, no one's around. And the exit? It won't open. The lights flicker. The words on the museum labels become obscured. Then a red message appears on the wall. "You can't go back. You can't go anywhere." Then a message in blue. "We're lonely. Come back. Everyone's waiting for you." Blue paint drips from the walls, and the embodiment of spirit sculpture has been replaced with a decaying yellow rose. The placard has been covered with a new description that reads, "Your heart is fabricated." Mary runs to the second floor as the lights continue to dim. Just in case, she pulls out the palette knife for protection. "Poor little Mary," a note on the wall says. "Forever wandering all on your own. It's too late." She reaches the room where the fabricated world painting once was, but now it's gone. "Come, Mary" is written in red on the floor, and where the painting once was is the final message. Into the darkness. Mary is trapped. She runs around the gallery looking for an escape, but the darkness continues to creep in. She's scared. She thinks this is the outside world and she feels betrayed. It was meant to be a bright, fun place full of people, not a world plunged into darkness, leaving her all alone. She screams for Eve, then Gary, and finally, her father. But it's no use. She goes silent, and the ending's title, "A Painting's Demise," is shown at the bottom corner of the screen. When I saw this ending, I was floored. Why would the cursed gallery want Mary dead, and why only if she failed to trade places with Gary? In the cursed gallery, we learn from Guertena's archive books that Mary was the last painting he created before he died. At first, I thought she should hold some sort of status or power being the last piece created. But when you consider it from Guertena's perspective, Mary is one of his many, many creations, the youngest even, who could be considered naive and newer to this strange, dark world. In the original version of Eve, there's a diary entry that can be found of Guertena's. In it, he talks about a theory in which spirits dwell in objects into which people put their feelings. He believes if this is true, then the same must be true of artwork. So he decides to immerse himself in work, to impart his own spirit into his creations. It seems Guertena was successful, giving his art life by imbuing each piece with a memory, emotion, or piece of himself. This isn't new information to longtime fans of the game, but maybe, by doing this, Guertena becomes the gallery itself, which houses all of his emotions, thoughts, and feelings within the artwork. Each piece now has its own sentience based on the specific fragment of Guertena it holds. For example, the painted ladies are noted to be troublesome and obsessed with chasing humans once they take an interest in them. This reflects Guertena's negative memories and emotions surrounding the women in his past that attempted to court him for his inheritance. The symbolism of Tryst after death, a sculpture in the dungeon, also seems to reflect his newfound power and control over all of his artwork. In this domain, he is king, and while a tryst is meant to be romantic, I think the title is more ironic than anything. It's odd to me that the skeleton's robe, crown, and jewel on the sword are a deep, saturated red, while the woman's dress is faded. Maybe the faded red represents the false love of the woman. The saturated color, a transfer of power and control back to Guertena. their reunion in death more of a reckoning than a tryst that showcases Guertena's unresolved anger and need for control. So if Guertena is the darker parts of the gallery and the artwork fragments of his inner self, it would explain the conflicting messages written to Mary in red and blue. Some encourage her to return to the cursed gallery, while another says she can't go back. We're lonely and waiting for you, but also it's too late. You're doomed to wander around forever. The back and forth in the dialogue to Mary could be a combination of Guertena's wrath as the gallery itself and the artwork that befriended her, the pieces that aren't as filled with malice. So does this mean it's Guertena who kills Mary in the painting's demise ending? It would be pretty tragic, especially as she calls out to her father to save her. You could also look at it as her asking her father to stop attacking her, but it seems she doesn't know his fate. For example, in the True Guertena exhibit, a bonus room available in the remake, Mary wonders aloud as to where her dad is. She also never directly speaks to her father within the cursed gallery and instead only talks to the different artworks directly. She also doesn't fully understand the rules of the world Guertena created, nor the consequences for breaking those rules. In the violet area of the gallery, another book can be found titled Theories of This World. It states via a trading of existences, the imaginary can be made reality. This explains why Mary needs to trade places with Gary, and when she leaves Eve and Gary both behind, she breaks the law of equivalent exchange. The consequence for not having a soul to trade is her very existence. But who makes these rules? I'm guessing Guertena himself, because to allow a part of himself to re-enter reality, he must acquire another piece of humanity. The gallery must remain complete. According to the embodiment of spirit sculpture, roses only bloom in wholesome bodies, so it seems that only individuals who are wholesome are chosen to be lured into the exhibit. The death of an individual within the cursed gallery results in them being turned into one of Guertena's works, which I found fitting if he's in fact the gallery itself. Each death is another one of his creations, so to speak, and maybe choosing wholesome spirits allows him to replace a bit of his own bitterness, wrath, and despair with more preferable feelings. And I know it might seem like I'm painting Guertena to be this overarching evil man, but the reality is, like all of us, he had a variety of complex emotions. I don't think he's evil, but I do think his rage, sadness, and dissatisfaction throughout life are the darker emotions that have prevailed and mostly taken over the gallery. In this way, Mary and Guertena are more alike than we realize. There's evidence in the gallery that Guertena's life didn't always feel like his own. The well-meaning hell painting depicts a motherly or teacher-like red figure who is scolding a child colored in blue while they practice the piano. If this child is Guertena, then he has no sense of agency here and is likely made to feel ashamed of not being able to perform perfectly. In the dungeon, a painting titled A Place Out of Reach depicts what appears to be a woman in a white dress standing on top of a roof, lined with a fence made of heart-shaped iron. Maybe this was a love interest that Guertena was never able to pursue. It's assumed he comes from a high-class family, having an inheritance and having extensive knowledge of the upper class represented in his paintings. So it could be possible that he was unable to love who he truly wanted due to differences in class and a controlling family preventing such a union. There's the mistake painting, in which a man's face is completely scribbled out, an interpretation of his view about his own life. Even the final stage sculpture is a literal deathbed, it killing Eve should she choose to sleep on it throughout the entirety of her dream. The headboard made of black shattered pieces held together by red wire could mean that even on Guertena's deathbed, he still felt incomplete and broken, his control over his own life barely held together. Only in death would he be able to dream and relive his happiest moments, much like Eve dreamt about her birthday. Maybe Guertena never fully realized who he could truly be due to the people around him and his place in society. And Mary, well, we saw her existential crisis firsthand. All she wanted was the human experience, to have fun and make friends, to be loved. Yet like Guertena, she was forced into an identity of which she couldn't escape. As a painting, she was never meant to leave the gallery. Even the together forever ending hints that Mary can't get exactly what she wants, as she's still an imaginary being according to her shadow. All she and Guertena wanted was the agency to make their own choices, to live their lives authentically, but they were denied that. In the end, both Mary and Guertena were tragic figures bound by the expectations and limitations of their individual situations, and both desired autonomy and a life truly their own. At least, that's what I like to think anyway. But there are so many different interpretations you can make about this game, from the artwork alone to the character analyses to the story itself. I wanted to go off on this whole tangent where I review the parallels between Mary's character and Ellen from The Witch's House, but maybe I'll save that for another time. As always though, I want to know what you think about Eve. I always look forward to reading your theories and thoughts, and I can't wait to see what your brilliant minds come up with. If you want another perspective on Eve that I found really fascinating when researching the game, I suggest checking out Panopticon Theater's analysis, which I'll include in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Here's another one of my videos. And as always, may your nightmares be strangely cozy.